Okay, if you haven't checked in, here's the QR code, and recall that in order to graduate, you have to have checked in and attended 6 sessions, and also do the presentation at the end. And there is a QR code at the end of this presentation for the demo day sign up. It is a 6-minute presentation. What do you need?
Camera frame.
Oh.
You're only in front of it if you're in front of the computer.
Oh, well, I mean, we could turn it off. I'm not that important. Okay. It's the slides that are more important. But are we recording this whole long thing here? Because I can make that smaller. All right, so at the end, there's a QR code to sign up for the demo day. At this point, there's just lots of time, and as we get closer, we'll actually schedule people. 6-minute pitch. Okay. Tonight, we're going to be talking about markets, but before we get into that, we're going to ask a couple people to talk about what they learned from last week and tell us about your business in that very brief way. Tell us what you do, who you provide value to, how you have expenses, and then how you make money. Okay, so I'm gonna come to you first. This camera provides sound for the recording. This is for the room.
Hello, everybody. My name is Philip Ronnie, and I created a product called Record. It's a mobile application and marketplace where publishers and book illustrators. Publishers.
Rachana, you're on that, right?
Continue.
Okay.
Where publishers and children's book authors can sell their books to our users. What's different from us versus something like Amazon is we have technology that allows our users, the purchasers of these books, to record themselves reading the books and be able to play back those recordings over the pages later on. The way we make money is through selling these books and partnering with books publishers for audio recording. Our main expenses are storage of data and royalty distribution from book sales.
Oh, okay. What about marketing?
With marketing, we're pretty small. Actually, haven't launched yet.
Well, how are you going to get customers?
Okay. So we're partnering with different community groups to start off with. Currently, we have a partnership with Metro to be our first users, and we'll see how that goes. And if it picks up, we'll figure it out.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Good. Okay. How about?
Hey, my name is Matt Rangel. I have a small digital marketing agency right now. I've been active for about a year and a half. So focusing on making custom, simple, holistic digital marketing campaigns. I know it's pretty broad, but I'm here to really niche it down and focus on finding, products, whether that's a software or just an offer that makes sense to, businesses who need help. So yeah, happy to be here. When it comes to costs, my costs are mainly my software. Testing out new software is super important, whether it's something that's new on the market or something that I've used in the past. And what was the last question?
You said what your expenses are going to be and how you're going to make money.
Make money just by testing out the market, seeing, just by, keeping it going. Packages could be custom packages, marketing packages. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. And lady in blue. You're not ready? I like your book.
She wants to be a unicorn.
like to share? Yeah. Great. We'd like to hear what you're doing. And this will be the last one. We'll get into the session part.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Paige Mears. I am the founder and CEO of the Incubate app. It is a domestic travel experience app that runs off of planned spontaneity. We provide unique experiences for our users through our mobile app by having them take an interactive quiz where we niche down what kind of experiences they would be open to. They let us know the date, how much they want to spend, and their location. And they're also able to share with other people in their party. We make money by hosting subscriptions for our users, as well as taking a percentage off of each experience. We also provide different options for businesses to host on our mobile app, as well as to get more customers for their target audience. We expect to spend money on marketing, mobile app development, and a few other social media sponsorships for the future.
Thank you very much. Is your app developed yet? Not yet. Okay. All right. Next Monday, 5 days from now, yeah, we'll have a midpoint check-in. And so if I go over stuff too quickly tonight, we can cover a little bit again next week. We do have the mentors coming in here, so I don't want to infringe on their time. And then we will have legal strategy and entity formation next Wednesday. And you can see what the rest of the course is. Okay, understanding your market and where you fit in it. And you may hear these words TAM, SAM, SOM, especially if you're watching Shark Tank at night. And we will cover what these things are. TAM is the total addressable market. And the total addressable market is all the people in all the world that can buy your product or service. The service available market chunks it down. It is a subset, and it's going to be the first segment of that larger market that you're going to attack. So it could be a specific niche of the market, or it could be a specific geography of the market. And it makes it more reasonable and approachable than the whole wide world. And then SOM is your obtainable market. And this should be the portion of the market that you think that you can achieve in a time-bound period, 3 to 5 years. And this is a bottom-up number, whereas the other two numbers should be research numbers. So we'll go into that a little bit more. Here is a list of a bunch of different investors, and they all think that market is really important. I know that with the funds that we're part of, the market has to be large enough that you could scale to have an exit. The funds that we're associated with are very early stage. And so when you're a very early stage investor, you have to be thinking 30 to 50 to 100x return on your investment. And the reason you have to think so big is because later investment will dilute you. And so looking at the numbers from when you're first investing, it has to be 30 to 50 to 100x of what you invested in at that time. But market plays an important role in what everybody is looking for as an investor. There are ways to calculate it, and some of them are just not realistic for a startup. The first place to start is Google. Find out what your market is and ask Google, what is the US market, or what is the worldwide market for car parts? Or for apps is a little harder. Let's say it's the US market for, no, what are you working on?
Home services.
Home services, okay. So home services, it's not likely that Noah is going to be able to drive to Portland, Maine and provide home services. So his market is already chunked down. But to understand the breadth of the home services market, it's very easy to do research on Google. Google what was the home services spend in the US in 2023. And it should be able to come up with a figure and the citation of where that research came from. And the citation is important, I'll tell you why in a little bit. But you can also use these other resources that are free, World Bank and the CIA World Factbook. Bottom up, you start with your very first market and you can do research on that. It's going to give you a very narrow scope and not something that an investor is probably going to be interested in. They want to see the big picture. And then this external research can be expensive. There are databases that you can access, but most of them have a fee associated with them. And when it comes to professional research being done by Gartner or Forrester, that's just out of reach for a startup. It's in the $50,000 range. But we have a great resource here at UNLV. UNLV and UNR are land grant universities. So that means that they have a duty to the public if they can possibly help them. And you guys have an amazing research librarian here at UNLV, and his name will be at the end of the presentation. His name is Patrick Griffiths, and he will help you just by sending an email. And the people that I've referred him to have said, you know, I sent him an email on Sunday morning, and he got back to me by Sunday afternoon. So the guy is relentless, and he's very, very helpful. The thing about working with Patrick is if your questions are too broad, it's very difficult for him to give you a good answer. And so if you're running into that kind of difficulty, then you can contact me and we can work together to try to narrow it down to make sense. All right, so we have a couple of examples here just so you guys can see how this whole thing works. So Uber, their total addressable market was transportation, and they included all of transportation. So that included ship traffic, it included train traffic, it included, you know, helicopters and military, it included everything. So back then in 2007, it was 5.7 trillion. And then they really chunked it right down to the part of the market that they were part of, which was taxi and limousine services. So at the time that they first went out.
What are you doing? What is that?
It's Tam, Sam, and Tom. Okay, so taxi and limousine spend that was existent at the time was 4.2 billion in the USA in 2007. Okay, so we chunked it down from the world to the USA, and then we also chunked it down to taxi and limousine service. So this is the exact area that their business was playing in. And then for their attainable market, they did a best, a worst, and a realistic case. There was not a lot of venture capital that was running around at the time. And so they just thought that this would be a good way to give options. So in the best case, they thought at some point they would be a 1 billion yearly revenue company. In the worst case, they would just stay what they were at, which was a 10-car service where it was subscriptions for these clients, and they would take them around town. On the other hand, their plan was to penetrate the top 5 cities and garner 5% of the limousine and taxi services in those cities. And so Uber's revenue in 2023 was 37.6 billion. And I usually check this on the day that I give a presentation so I can give you a current market value, but I did not do that. I was distracted by meeting stuff. So their current valuation, which was probably about 4 months ago, last time I gave this presentation, was 156 billion, quite a bit more than 1 billion. But they have expanded, right? They're doing Uber Eats, they have freight services they're doing, they have mobility, meaning bicycles and scooters. So they've really expanded their market. And here is an Airbnb example. So Airbnb started in San Francisco, a bunch of young guys who were living over by Moscone Center. And they figured that when the conventions came to town, it was so hard to find a hotel room that they would be able to actually put an air mattress in a room and sell that room. And that's why it's Airbnb. People don't know why the hair is there, and that's why. So they thought that they did their research. There were 1.9 billion trips booked, and this was, what year are we in here? I don't remember what year they were. Around the same time, 2008 maybe. And they figured that the people who were willing to sleep on an air mattress on the floor were not going to be staying up the 4 seasons. So they characterized them as budget and people who were comfortable using online booking, which was kind of a new thing back then. And so they calculated that they would be able to do about 10.6 million trips. And they figured they were going to make $20 as an average fee, and the price that the customers would pay would be $70 for 3 nights. They would earn $20. And so that worked out to a projected revenue for them of $200 million. And so in 3 months ago, I can't see what it is, but 89.1 million was their valuation a few months ago. So they very much exceeded their expectations as well. And here is a much smaller example, maybe one that's more relatable. This was a couple of guys who were living in New York, and they had this idea that they could rent jerseys, sports jerseys, to the very enthusiastic fans that are located there in the New York metro area. And they thought they should test this idea, which I'm a big proponent of testing, and all the time we spent talking about customer discovery and going to Fremont Street. So they had this idea, and they thought, okay, let's go to a ball game and let's ask people. So their premise was that there were 150 million Americans that watched the 5 major team sports. And they're going to start in New York. So how many people would be in New York that watch the 5 major sports teams? And they decided it was 11 million. And they did this research. And then who is going to be the most likely customer in the New York area? And that's when they went to Yankee Stadium at a summertime game, and they just talked to people. And they said, they did the customer discovery thing. Hey, if I were to rent you a jersey for the whole season, would you go for it? They were assuming that their best target customer was a season ticket holder. Because, if they were willing to shell out the money to be a season ticket holder, then they were probably the kind of fan that would want to wear somebody's jersey. So they said that 11.7% of those people that were at the ball field showed a very strong interest. And so they figured out, extrapolating against the 11 million, that it would be 1.3 million people who could be their customers. And what they learned, surprisingly, was that people wanted to rent the jersey for one visit. Like, hey, if I'm going to buy a ticket, take the whole family, I would like to wear a jersey that one day that I'm going. So they had this whole new channel that they didn't expect, which would be one-time users. And then they said, well, what happens if you trade my player? And they said, oh, no problem. You send me your jersey, you pick your new favorite player, and we'll send it right back out to you. And the other thing that surprised them, women were just as interested in having these shirts as the men were. So that last bit was not in our preferred depiction of the TM salmon song. These are circles within circles, which represents that the psalm is a much smaller percentage of the SAM, and the SAM is a smaller percentage than the TAM. So this translates the information we have back here into this diagram. It's called a stacked Venn diagram. And so we've taken the information and put it into this stacked Venn diagram. Americans that watch the 5 major sports, New Yorkers that watch the 5 major sports, and then New Yorkers that were enthusiastic about their service. But this doesn't really tell us about revenue. And we want to understand the market in terms of revenue, not in terms of users. So they have this one-time user and they have this season-long user. And based on the customer research that they did at Yankee Stadium, 60% of the people were willing to do a one-time.
C'est bien quelques mots en français.
40% were willing
Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire?
to renting.
J'ai fait mes devoirs.
Can you, thank you. So the one-time fee, they figured would be $50. That includes the shipping to them, and then a box to return it. So that's what the customers paid, just $50. And the season rental was $250. Again, they get to return it at the end of the season. And so the one-time users times 60% of the people who were enthusiastic about it gets them to 39 million. And the season-long users at 250 gets them to 130 million, and total revenue projection, their sum, is 169 million. And they probably figured that'd be about after 2 or 3 seasons, so they built up some customer loyalty. Okay, here's another example. This is an example from one of the companies that StartUpNV invested in, and let me give you a little background on it. So this looks like a guy who's wearing a kerchief. Their brand is called Outlaw Soaps. And so they had done a ton of market research, and they knew that they could appeal to people who rode Harleys, who liked blazing saddles, who were in the military, and were summer concert goers. And so they had done enough market research to understand that this is who their audience is. They had fragrances like Lust in the Dust and Blazing Saddles and Whiskey Something. So they're kind of more masculine and campfire oriented scents. And Home on the Range, that's another one. So when she talks about her market, she shows this image first. And she says, 80% of Americans are my customers. And they're my customers because they go to concerts and they ride Harleys and they do this other stuff. And that is a $3 billion market. And while this is on the screen, she's describing it and she builds it up. Oh, okay. The markets are for solid scents like that, for lotions, for soaps, and for candles. So that's how she builds it up, and you get this beautiful image to watch as she does. So no stacked Venn diagram, but very easy to understand. All right, so your target customer profile, she knew exactly who the people were, and to be frank, she was in business for a while. So she discovered who her customers were over time and then really penetrated their markets. So as you're trying to figure out who your customers are, you are going to be doing that. We talked just briefly about customer personas, and she probably created a customer persona that was slightly different from what it ended up being, with fragrances like Blazing Saddles and Whiskey on the Rocks. They're very masculine types of scents. So she probably didn't have a customer that was a very feminine sort of female, kind of a little more out there, a little more outlaw. So we will work on a little bit of customer profiling and understanding your competitors. So this got jumped into this market research. The two things are usually close together. In a pitch presentation, you want to demonstrate that you know who your customers are. You do have, who your competitors are. You do have competition, even if it's status quo. Oftentimes, status quo is the worst competitor to have because it may be easier to do nothing than to pay for your solution. So you want to make sure that your solution is enticing enough, that it does enough, that it makes life easier for your customers so that they are willing to pay instead of doing nothing. So, and you can do the same sort of competition research through UNLV, and Patrick Griffiths, he's happy to help you do that. You want to know what your competitive advantage is. Especially if you're going for investment, you'll hear investors say, what's your moat? What is your moat is the differentiation that you have that your other competitors don't have that makes it so that you will be able to gain more of the market than they will. And so being faster, being more reliable, being more fun to do are all kinds of things that can be part of your moat components. One of the nicest ways to depict your competitors is to list some features that you have that they don't, and you would put yourself first. You'd put yourself first or last, and you list these functionalities that you have that they don't, or they have in a very poor way, and you have a better way, and then you can show this comparison. It makes it easy to understand. Let me tell you one thing about competition though. If you are presenting to investors or even a room full of savvy people, if you don't list the competitors that show up when you do a search on your phone, you are missing the boat. You have to include the things that they are going to find quickest on their phone as your competitors. They may not perceive yet the difference of what your business is, but you kind of have to ask and you have to figure out, if they were searching for your competitors, what phrase would they put into Google to find those competitors? And then you should just deal with it head on. Yeah, they're a competitor, but we're better in this way. So that is one area where people will raise an eyebrow during a pitch if you don't have the competitors that they find really easily on Google. Here is a nice rack-up. We call this either a rack-up or a competition matrix. And this was a group of students actually at UNR. UNR has a competition called the, you guys aren't from there, so you won't know. Sontag. It's the Sontag competition. It's an endowed sort of prize in the business school. And so every spring they have this competition, and it's more like a business plan and then a pitch competition. And these gentlemen with the very first one there called Stern, they won their competition that year. And what they were doing was creating these personal excursion vehicles on a Toyota base, but they were using marine quality materials and they were being as green as possible. So they had solar panels and they had ways to kind of function off-grid. One of the things that they listed as a feature is that because it was on a Toyota truck bed, it was smaller and able to go to more remote places than a lot of these others, especially the Winnebago. Yeah, well, actually, that one doesn't look that big, but anyway, the Toyota was smaller. And so one of the subtle things that they did here, you can take note, is that the X's are smaller and the check marks are bigger, and their green check marks are bigger than the Winnebago check marks. Okay, so it's kind of subtle image stuff. All right. To do your competition research, you will have to figure out what your industry is so that you can ask Patrick to help you. You should be aware of industry trends. Like right now, all of us investors are hearing about how every single product is AI powered. It's so ubiquitous that it has no meaning anymore. So when they say, well, we're using AI to do this, it's like, exactly how are you using AI? And is it learning? And what's happening with it? So don't get too caught up in that kind of stuff. All right, what is your product or service, your mission and value proposition? So we've been talking about the value proposition a little bit. The value proposition is the problem that you solve in your own customers' words. What is it doing for them and how does it give them value? Does it save them time? Does it make them more efficient? Does it make them look like they're a bigger organization than they are? So you need to be speaking with your customers in order to create a value proposition. All right, here he is, man of the hour, Patrick Griffiths. Go ahead and take a picture. And he knows he gets to say to these people every time I do this talk. He's a super nice guy. And here we have those QR codes. So the demo day sign up, and then also check in if you haven't done so already. People online, please do check in. I know we were late getting started, and I apologize to the people online. We will have this issue whipped for next time. It won't be an issue again. But the link may actually change, so keep an eye out. We'll post it in Disco, and we'll also send you an email so that you know. And make sure you're invited to those events. All right, questions? Yes, ma'am. Okay, don't bother with the demo day this night. We'll get that fixed for next time too. Yeah, well, yes, sir. Okay, so the gentleman in the group is suggesting Perplexity as an AI that is helpful in doing sort of business research. I know that Notebook LM, it's another Google product, and I use Notebook for reading through thick articles and then pulling out insights from it. So you can ask it specific questions about it, and it's great. I actually don't use ChatGPT. I use Claude and I use Notebook. So, but I haven't tried Perplexity. And then there's another one where you can almost ask it to create a little piece of software for you to solve a particular function, and it wants to do it. Amazing. And then you have HubSpot. HubSpot is a customer relationship management piece of software. So if you're trying to build up a database of your customers, you can use HubSpot for free for a really long time before you have to pay for it. Now, it has some really cool features, and I don't actually know what the difference is between the free version and the paid version in terms of which features you can start to use when you're still on free version. But they have worked in a lot of AI to automate marketing processes in HubSpot. So it's not a bad way to get started if you need just a free way to keep track of all of your customers. Other questions online? Okay, so Mr. You're not Rangel, are you? Okay. Oh.
About Patrick, what is it that he can help us with?
Oh. So Patrick is the patent librarian as well as a research librarian at UNLV. So if you're wondering if there are any patents around the product that you're trying to create, he can do searches for that. And then he can also help you do market research. So he has several databases that are available to him. We have a database called PitchBook, which is very expensive, too expensive for the university, but it's sponsored by grants. And so if you're trying to figure out if there is another startup that's working on a particular type of technology, you can write to me and ask, can we do a little research on this and find out how many companies or which companies are working on this particular technical problem? But he has IBIS World, he has Statista. Statista has great statistics on all sorts of stuff worldwide. He may have one app piece of software. There's one called App Annie, and there's another one. I think it's called the Business of Apps, where you can find out Business of Apps. You can find out what other published applications there are that are competing with what you're trying to do. Okay, more questions?
Patrick rocks in the chat.
Yes, he is really great. But like I said, if you're asking too broad a question, he gets a little frustrated with you, just come back to me and we'll figure out a way to narrow it down so he can do the research, but you've got better questions to ask. Okay. All right, so the time is 18:57. So it's time for mentors. Thank you, Amanda and Steve, for coming again. I see Nathaniel out there. Noah is here. Yeah, but I don't see David Yokin. Okay, and I'm here. So, oh, I think that David out there. Yeah, David's out there. Hi, guys. It's almost your time to shine. Okay, so then we can end the online time